You get to the end of your interview and the interviewer asks you, "So, that's all my questions. What questions do you have for me?" If you're like most people I coach, you may be nervous about this part of the interview, and if so, you're in the right place. You don't have to freeze up because I'll teach you how to ask some insightful, interesting questions that will impress your interviewers. Stay tuned to the end to hear a few little-known tips about how many questions to prepare and an expert mode where you can learn how to come up with interesting and relevant questions on the fly. If you're looking for the 7 best questions to ask at the end of an interview, this is not that video. There's just so much of that information out there, and I personally find it quite trite. As an interviewer, I can spot when a candidate is asking me generic questions that they found on some top 10 article on the internet. If this is you, that's okay. You are going to be transformed by this video. My advice to all job seekers is that if you want to land a great role at a top-tier company, you need to go beyond asking questions from a top 10 list. And I will teach you how to do this in a natural way that feels genuine and authentic to you. Now, for posterity, I have to say that at some point, I'm sure I'll cave and I'll create a top 5 questions to ask at the end of your interview video. And ideally, it will be much shorter than this one. But I like to teach people the why behind why interviewers allow you to ask questions at the end of the interview. And then I can teach you an effective approach to crafting questions for these interviewers that will significantly increase your chances of impressing them and landing the job. If you don't know what the interviewers are looking for, you simply can't come up with the perfect questions. This video teaches you how to do research on the role, the company, the industry, and the interviewers, and how to use that information to prepare thoughtful and interesting questions for your interviewers. Do this well, and I guarantee you will stand out from other candidates. Welcome to the Pocketboard channel, where accomplished industry mentors share their hard-earned lessons learned, guidance, and mentoring tips to help you navigate your current professional goals. My name is Erika, and I'm a former Google hiring manager and an interview coach. Landing my dream job at Google almost 10 years ago changed the entire trajectory of my career, and I mentor people to help them land their dream jobs because I know how life-changing the right job can be. As an interviewer, I've been on the other side of the table at least 1,000 times. I've learned what works and what doesn't work when it comes to acing job interviews. I've mentored and interview prepped almost 100 people who've gone on to land their dream jobs at top-tier companies, including the super tough FANG companies. Many candidates appear to wing the "what questions do you have for me" part of the interview. And as someone who is a prolific interviewer at a top-tier employer, I cannot underscore how important it is to ask great questions and how much of a difference it can make between an offer and no offer. As an interviewer, I actually look forward to the questions that candidates ask me. For me, it's the most fun part of the interview. And for candidates that ask me great questions, I often give them a lot of great information. When an interviewer asks you what questions you have, this is your time to show your level of interest and engagement and curiosity about the company. So please don't squander this opportunity. Giving candidates 3 to 7 minutes at the end of an interview to ask questions is increasingly standard for interviews at most companies. This is happening for 2 reasons. First, companies want to hire the best, and they know that the best candidates will interview them as much as they are interviewing you. Secondly, it gives the company some key signals about you that they can use as tiebreakers to decide who gets the offer when they have multiple qualified candidates. I can't underscore how important it is to take advantage of this opportunity. So I'm going to say it again. This is your time to shine. Okay, let's dive right in. I'm going to first explain the 3 signals that interviewers are looking for in your questions. Explaining this should help you understand why crafting great questions matters so much. The first signal that interviewers get from the questions you ask at the end of an interview is your general level of preparedness. If you have thoughtful questions about the role, the company, or the industry, it will signal that you have prepared for the interview, which is a sign that you will show up prepared and be a great employee. The second signal that interviewers get from your questions is your natural inquisitiveness and curiosity. If you ask insightful and interesting questions about the role, the company, or the industry, it will signal that you have a sense of curiosity. It will also hint at your overall intellectual abilities. The final signal that interviewers get from the questions you ask at the end of an interview is your general level of engagement in the interview and your interest in the role. I find that candidates that are using the volume approach to interviewing tend to fail at this signal because they are so busy applying and interviewing for many roles that they don't take the time to really learn much about this role or this company. And they tend to be exhausted from their high volume job search. So they also tend to be less engaged in my interview as well. You really can't fake interest and engagement, so I generally don't recommend the spray and pray or volume approach to finding a job. Conducting an effective job search is a totally different topic for a different video that I will make for you in the future. Coming back to engagement and interest, candidates who are targeting this role and this company tend to demonstrate their level of interest by asking well-researched questions prepared in advance. Candidates who are highly engaged in the interview itself also tend to demonstrate their level of engagement, but they do it by asking questions that point back at information that the interviewer has shared with them during the interview. I will teach you how to do a nice mix of researched questions and on-the-fly questions in this video, so you can demonstrate both your level of interest in the role and engagement in the interview. I often find that it's both funny and helpful to point out what kinds of answers will have a negative impact, so that you can understand all the possible trip hazards from the perspective of the interviewer or employer. And then it's easier to avoid them. I'm going to review the 3 main tripping hazards when you're asking questions at the end of the interview. First, you must ask questions. I immediately rule out any candidate that doesn't ask me at least one question at the end of the interview. That's right, as an interviewer at Google, I will give a no hire signal to any candidate who doesn't ask me at least one question. Not asking questions tells me that you aren't prepared or that you aren't particularly interested in the role. So you must ask questions to demonstrate that you are prepared for the interview and or interested in the role. Second, you do not want to ask questions that are unrelated to the role, the industry, the company, or the interviewers. This may seem obvious, but I've had candidates ask me questions that really cause me to scratch my head, wondering, what did they expect to get from asking that question? Eventually, I realized it's because they read some online blog articles about asking questions at the end of the interview, and they just randomly chose some questions from the question bank in the article. This is not a good idea. Remember, you are trying to show that you are interested in this role. So ask questions related to this role, this company, this industry, or even questions about this interviewer who is sitting in front of you. And don't worry, I'm going to teach you how to do this. Lastly, you want to avoid asking questions that assume you've already landed the role. As an interviewer, I want to see how you vet the company or the role. And when you ask questions about the company benefits or about your future boss or about where you're going to sit, I don't get any signal on your thought process for assessing us as a company. Focus on asking questions that demonstrate that you are intaking key information for your employment decision. I will show you how to do this later in the video. Okay, now that you understand what it is that interviewers are looking for in your answers and what not to do, I can now teach you how to construct awesome questions that will demonstrate your preparedness, your curiosity, and your engagement. As with many of my videos on how to prepare for common interview questions, you are going to start by doing some research. We're going to talk about 3 major areas of research you need to do as you prepare questions for the end of an interview. In my video, How to Prepare for Any Interview, I walk you through 3 major tips for preparing for any interview. And one of those tips is do your research. You can watch that video after this one to learn more about doing research and to reinforce all of the tips I'm about to share with you. First, you need to know the role. Why does this matter? It's going to be pretty hard to come up with good questions about the job if you don't really know what the job entails. The best candidates, in my experience, come with interesting questions about the role. Read the job description a few times before your interview. Map keywords and phrases to your own resume. You can use color coding, icons, emojis, really whatever works that helps you map that job description and its words and phrases to your own experience. For example, if the job description calls for driving process improvements, make sure to map that phrase on the job description to your past projects listed on your resume where you were driving process improvements. For example, you might write down process improvements. In X job, I reworked a manufacturing process, saved $500K annually, and improved worker conditions. When asked in the interview, what questions do you have for me? You can then ask questions about specific job responsibilities. First, by pointing at your past experience, then asking a question about how the interviewer envisions this work being successful at this company. Using this formula for asking questions about the role will reinforce your fit for the role by showing your abilities and past experiences as mapped to key job responsibilities, and it will demonstrate your interest in the role and your engagement with the interviewer by asking the interviewer to share their thoughts. You can format your question in many ways, but I will provide a starter formula for you, and you can feel free to customize it. This will be included in the description of the video. Using the same process improvement example from above, I'm going to formulate a question that points at my past experience and then asks how the interviewer interprets that job responsibility at this company in this role. In my last role, I took on some rewarding process improvement projects, including one where I saved the company over $500,000 each year and improved worker conditions for our manufacturing operators. The description for this job talks about process improvements as well, and I wondered if you could share with me what you think success looks like in terms of cost savings, sustainability, innovation, or any other key metric that you see as important for making process improvements in this role. In addition to knowing about the role and asking interesting questions about the job itself, you also need to ask questions about the company and about their business. You need to show that you did your homework. We live in a world of information access, so there's really no excuse for showing up without doing your research about the company. First, you need to learn about the industry. You'll want to come in with some thoughts and opinions about the direction of the industry, which starts by first understanding key industry players, trends, the state of the industry. There are thousands of YouTube videos about industries, not to mention analyst reports with predictions and forecasts about every industry imaginable. Learn a bit about the industry first, then I'll teach you how to formulate interesting questions. You want to formulate questions about the industry that show that you've done your research, in particular into key players and trends that may impact the industry. For questions about trends that may impact the industry, you can follow or adapt this formula. With XYZ trend happening, how do you see this industry evolving in the next 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 years? For questions about key players that may impact the industry or this company, follow this formula. With XYZ company entering or winning the X market or industry, what do you see as the key moves that this company should make to drive differentiated value for users, customers, or clients? I'll give a few examples that demonstrate these formula in action. Hearing these should be a good starting point for you to think about the interesting questions for the industries you are interviewing for. With social trends shifting towards higher expectations in privacy and transparency, how do you anticipate that this industry will evolve in the next 3 to 5 years? With higher bandwidth internet becoming more ubiquitous across the world, how do you see this industry evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? With Amazon entering the healthcare market with its strong capabilities in supply chain, warehousing, and delivery, what do you see as the key moves that this company should make to drive differentiated value for users? Next, learn about recent wins for the company. Read recent press releases, which are usually located very prominently on the company's website. If they're a public company, you can search for recent news associated with their stock ticker. You'll then want to formulate questions about these recent company updates that show that you've done your research into the company and that you have questions about their recent business strategies or other changes. If the company news is positive, ask the interviewer how they see it changing the company. For example, I read some recent positive news for the company, including some exciting event like a key milestone or a new customer or a partnership. How do you see that impacting your role and the role that I'm interviewing for? If you find some negative news like bad press or losing a key customer, you should also ask about that to get a full picture of what you'd be walking into if you take the role. However, you need to tread carefully here. You want to formulate your questions to come across as open-minded and non-threatening so you can get the best information. The safest way to do this is to just ask generally about this aspect of the company. For example, let's say they just lost their top customer. You can ask the interviewer, "Can you share with me how the company works to attract and retain important customers?" If the company just got bad press for an internal problem like company culture, use this same approach, asking, "Can you share with me how you view the company culture? In particular, share with me some things you love and some aspects that you'd like to change as well." Lastly, take some time to learn about your interviewers. Remember that interviewers are people too, and it helps to have some context around who your interviewers are, their backgrounds, their role in the company. Some recruiters will directly give you the names of your interviewers, and then you can use LinkedIn to learn more about their role at the company and their backgrounds and prior experience. If the recruiter can't give you the interviewers' names, usually this is because of a company policy that's in place to protect their workers' privacy. I would strongly recommend that you not be pushy. Instead, ask if the interviewer can share with you the interviewer's roles or titles so that you can prepare appropriate questions given their levels and roles within the company. This ask generally works. One thing to note here is that interviewers appreciate a prepared candidate who's researched the role, the industry, and the company, and even the professional background of the interviewer. However, there is such a thing as doing too much research into your interviewers, and it can come across as overstepping a boundary. Do not try to friend them on LinkedIn before the interview, and do not comment on anything in their social media before you have met them in person. Instead, ask them questions about their current role and responsibilities, their ideas for the company or the industry, and even about why they love this role, this company, and the industry they're working in. To ask the interviewer about their current role and responsibilities, you can ask something like, "You are the," insert role name or title. "I'd love to hear more about your role and how it interacts with the role I'm interviewing for." To ask the interviewer about their ideas for the company or industry while showing that you've done your research, you can say something like, "You've been working in or at this industry or company for X years. I'd love to hear your ideas for innovation or directions you could see this industry or company go in." To ask the interviewer about why they love this company, the industry, or even their role, you can ask something like, "Tell me what you love most about being in X role or working in Y industry or working at Z company." As an interviewer, there's really nothing worse than a candidate without any questions for me at the end. So make sure you have enough questions prepared that you have enough for every interviewer. On average, I find that candidates get through 2 to 4 questions with each interviewer. So depending on the number of interviews you have, prepare the right number of questions. I love when candidates come up with questions on the fly, especially when they refer back to something I told them in the interview, whether it's a question about me and my role at the company that I shared at the beginning of the interview, or maybe a second level follow-up question about an interview question I just asked, or even a clarifying question that shows that they were listening to everything I shared with them. For example, I do a lot of technical interviews where I'm asking the candidate to design or describe a system. I love when candidates follow up with questions or ideas to improve the system itself, or when they ask me how we might rethink the business case or the product strategy for that system. It puts me on the spot, and it makes our conversation more peer-to-peer, which I find delightful because it shows me what I would really experience if I were to work with this person on the job. At first, it can be daunting to try to come up with these on-the-fly questions. So it's okay to default to preparing your 3 to 4 questions per interviewer and sticking to your script. But as you get more skilled at interviewing and more comfortable, try some on-the-fly questions as well. Congratulations, you now know why interviewers give you the opportunity to ask questions at the end of an interview. I also shared with you how often I see these questions make an impact in hiring decisions at top-tier companies, so you know how important it is to have thoughtful questions that demonstrate your preparedness, your intelligence and curiosity, and your level of engagement and interest in the role. Lastly, I taught you a research framework that will give you plenty of fodder for some great questions that you can ask about the role, the industry, the company, and about the interviewers themselves. I'd love to see some comments below with questions you've researched and crafted that you're planning to ask in your interviews. In fact, I'll offer a challenge to push you to take a chance. I will personally review the first 20 questions posted in the comments below this video. You can give me context for each of your questions by posting the job description, the company name, the industry for each of the questions that you've prepared, and I will review them and give you feedback and improvement ideas and maybe even additional questions that you can ask. If you want me or other Pocketboard mentors to create more helpful videos, subscribe to this channel. To get new mentoring tips faster, make sure you ring the bell and you'll get notified every time we publish new videos. Please drop a comment in this video to tell us what mentoring tips or skills you want us to cover in our next Pocketboard mentoring video. I'm Erika G, and you can find me on Pocketboard if you'd like one-on-one mentorship and coaching with me.